How does intuition work? What are the mechanisms that really allow us to feel into the field of information that exists beyond our perception and be able to access it with accuracy and consistency? Great questions. Let's get into it. All right, thus far in the last 2 days, we've really focused our attention on what intuition is, how we can actually be able to access it. Now, we're going to talk about where these pathways actually exist and what that looks like in terms of readily and steadily being able to accurately access our intuitive talent. So today we're going to talk all about the concept of intuitive faculties. Now, I'm a child of the 80s. And some of you tuning in may not be familiar with the old school TVs. However, we used to have these big bulky television sets. And before we had digital cable, before we even had cable boxes, we used to have these bunny ear antennas. So right on top of the television would be these retractable metal antennae that would stick out and that would plug into the television. And then depending upon the sensitivity of the antenna, then we could actually pick up more clear stations. Sometimes it'd be a little wavy, a little distorted. However, what we could do is reposition the antenna a little bit and then also toss on a little bit of foil. Now, when you put on the foil, it had magically, not so magically, but magically it had better reception. Now, the thing about that is that when we look at that in terms of an analogy for today, what we're looking at is the vessel, us, our physical bodies. We're looking at the antenna, which is going to be our intuitive faculties, and the types of signal that these different antennae can access, right? Flashing forward to today, now we've got streaming cable and services. We also have regular television. We also have cable channels. And so there's a lot of different things from AM to FM radio to Wi-Fi signals, and these signals that are invisible to our naked eye are ever and always present, and it takes a very specific type of antenna to be able to access this very specific type of signal. And that's very, very similar in terms of what we're going to be talking about today as we really look at the different types of intuition. Generally speaking, we're going to dive deeply into that tomorrow and what that actually looks like when we talk about these intuitive faculties. So when we talk about intuitive faculties, I've discussed a little bit about our physical senses, right? And the capacity for us to perceive via sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, right? And looking at that, generally speaking, we use our eyes as cues, right? We can also use sound in terms of that subtle vibration, smells, so on and so forth. Now, our physical attributes have a metaphysical counterpart. So as we talk about this concept of intuitive faculties, we're also really starting to talk about the things that are held within our physical atomic body that can access as specialized antenna the different types of intuitive talents. Now here's the thing, very similar to a radio, right? Say, let's use a cell phone. You're driving on the mountain pass and you're heading out and you have 4 bars of reception as you start to drive through the mountains. The further you get in, the less reception that you have, right? You might go from 4 bars to 2 bars to at some points no bars, right? So we don't necessarily always have reception to these different signals. Or in fact, it's more a matter of our antenna's ability to access that signal overall. Because the thing about it is that our metaphysical intuitive faculties can largely depend upon the state of being that we are in, which is why the concept of coherence, right, the balancing and harmony that exists within inside of self is so important, because when we are in a coherent state, we are in the best state. Coherent state in about mid-range alpha to theta, we are in the best state to accurately answer, or rather access, the intuitive talents that we have. Because what ends up happening is that we can tap into the signal. Sometimes though it's a little splotchy, right? If we're low signal going through the mountains, then we might have 1 bar, 2 bars. We could be talking to someone. However, they may hear us sort of off and on, and they glitch a little bit. Same thing in terms of being able to access our intuitive talents is we may have these snippets, these pieces where we get reception, we receive a signal, and then it kind of conks out. And when it blips out, then we don't have the full picture, right? We only have bits and pieces. It's like attempting to make sense of a conversation that we only have 30 seconds of the 2-minute conversation that we had, right? It may come in and out, and we may have a gist, we may have a general idea. However, what we're talking about in this applied intuition experience is being able to readily and steadily access accurately our intuitive talents. And so part of that then is going to tie into how able are we to actually receive these signals. And so then we go back into intuitive faculties. These are the parts of our body that largely tie into the different types of signals. Now, the different types of signals that we have range dependent upon the intuitive talents that we are talking about. So if we're talking about, for example, physical cues, right? If we're talking about our physical cues, then we're also tying it into the capacity that our physical atomic body has to pick up on these types of cues, right? And so this ties into our what's called our musculoskeletal system. Musculoskeletal system basically just means the combination of our muscles, our bones, and the fascial tissue that's held within. Now, that's all physical, and that is very tangible. If we're talking, though, about more of the mental body and our psychic abilities, now we're talking about something different. These are electrical signals that exist that we are able to access via both our nervous system and what's called electroreceptors held within our fascia, which again is a little different if we're talking about our empathic abilities. Now, our empathic abilities, often if we look at things coming out of like the Heart Math Institute, for example, there is a field of information that is magnetic in nature that allows us to read into the feelings and the senses of another person. Right? And so that's magnetic. We're talking more about those empathic abilities, right? Finally, if we're talking about more, let's say, energetic awareness. This is a little bit different because this looks at the fundamental piece that's beneath the magnetic, the electric, the musculoskeletal, and the physical aspect and attributes, which is all about frequency. And really, oscillation. Now, when we talk about oscillation, all we're really talking about are the peaks and the valleys, much as we talked about on brainwave frequency, right? When we have, for example, those delta brainwave frequencies, flat, not a whole lot of activity, which is very different than our beta, which can have high peaks and valleys, right? And that range of frequency or oscillation is what our energetic senses can tap into. And that goes more into what's called our enteric nervous system. Now, we'll go into each and every one of these as we break down the 4 intuitive types tomorrow. And for the rest of this week, we're diving deeply into each of these individually. However, I just want to give a sense of what that means before we get into the nitty-gritty. So physical, musculoskeletal, we're talking really about the physical atomic body and how it relates to other physical atomic bodies, right? Psychic, that's electric. That's something that is about more data and information. It's something that we can read into and can access. Empathic is more magnetic. So when we talk about electromagnetic, it's really these two pieces. It's the concepts that have and exist, as well as the experience of these in real time. Energetic goes into frequency and oscillation. Now, this is a good one because it's kind of ties into all of these other areas as well and has a whole slew of experiences within itself. Now, the thing about all of these is that we have receptors within our bodies to be able to read into, to detect, to receive these signals. And as we talked about like an antenna, right? We're able to receive information, and from that we are able then to do, again, readily and steadily, to access accurately these levels of information through our different intuitive faculties. To a certain degree, you can take faculties and almost say organ, because these are tied to actual organs or aspects of our physical body. And again, we'll dive into that a little bit more in this coming week. For now, though, this is a great thing to really sit with, because what it does and allows for is the fact that we have everything that we need, right? If we look at just strictly our bodies from a physicality perspective, right? We have a lot of similarities: bones and muscle, nervous systems, organs, all these different things, which means that we, each and every one of us, have all of the faculties that allows us to access each and every one of these talents. Now, this is going to be super fun as we go further into it starting in our next session. For now, though, I feel that is good. We're going to get into some more experiential pieces starting in our next session. From day 8 on, we're going to be focusing much more on the actual experience, the practice, the tools, and the techniques. A little bit of this, more of that. That's it for now, though. Love and aloha. Take care, and ahui ho.